So Centennial Square is the heart of Victoria, and it was built to mark the 100th year founding of Victoria as a city, which happened in 1962. And 100 years plus later, the city of Victoria has decided to replan and renovate the square. And in the process, there's a recommendation to remove the Centennial Fountain. Now, the square is quite unusual in the built history of Victoria, in that it occurred as a project under the administration of Mayor Biggerstaff Wilson, who was probably one of the foremost innovators and most far-sighted thinkers about the future of the city. It was under Mayor Biggerstaff Wilson, for instance, that the first overall plan for Victoria was conceived. And the plan, among other things, saw Victoria retaining its position as the economic, commercial, retail, institutional hub of an expanding city. Post-war, Second World War, over a period of less than 20 years, the local population doubled in size. And was probably the result of this was one of the biggest building programs ever in the history of the city. The square brought together a design team of representing the major architectural practices of the day. There were some 15 people brought in from, for instance, the University of Victoria, which was building out at the time, the major architects working on that, and a visionary city planner by the name of Rod Clack, and also a visionary landscape architect by the name of Clive Justice. Clive had grown up in and about Victoria. His family had settled on Salt Spring Island. And he was joined by Herb Warren, who was the superintendent of parks, and the first, what you might call, professional landscape planner, gardener, to head up Victoria's parks. So with the architects and the landscape planners produced the monument we have today. And I'll read a line from the descriptor that introduced the concept to the Greater Victoria residents. It is believed to be a design plan to preserve some of vanishing Victoria by accepting historic values and at the same time pointing the way to a progressive urban future. So what this did was it preserved and restored the old City Hall. It preserved and restored the Pantages Theatre building, which is now used as a community theatre. And it added onto the square a series of modernist designs. The focus of the square, however, was on the Centennial Fountain. The focal point of the fountain was three monoliths, or pylons as we call them. On the face of each was a mosaic tiled art piece. And this was created by Jack Wilkinson, who was a local architect who specialized in the decoration of large-scale buildings. These three pylons were the gifts of the surrounding municipalities, Esquimalt, Saanich, and Oak Bay. And the program for the painting, for the artworks on them, was civic values. So while the city expanded and the suburbs grew, this was the suburbs' gift back to the city. So together, with the mix of architects, designers, the artists, and planners, you had a monument that formed not only the core of the city, but also functioned as a symbol of Victoria, literally on the cusp of a new era. It looked back to the past and it looked forward to the future. And the restoration of the historic buildings, of course, should be set against a second scheme of Mayor Bigstaff Wilson's imagination, which was the restoration of the core of the city. And under his administration, the first rollout of a plan to preserve the city and to accommodate the historic infrastructure by the creation of Centennial Square, but to balance it, Bastion Square, which was, of course, surrounded and built out of an entirely heritage infrastructure. So fast forward from 1962-63 to today, and you can see why this set of values is as relevant today as it was then, as we look forward to, say, another 100 years. The scheme to renovate or rejuvenate the square is commendable, but the decision to remove the fountain, which is the key element in the square, I think needs to be rethought. To this end, a group has coalesced called the Friends of Centennial Square, and to date they've accrued 1,700 signatures on a petition to do this, and they are running a campaign of conversations and counter proposals to find or to point the way to a solution that would see the fountain not just preserved but restored and brought back to life again as the heart of the square and indeed the city. The current notion communicated to the planning group that are looking at the rejuvenation of the square envisages a much more active square than in the past. Better accommodating large-scale celebratory events, and a particular focus on attracting children, perhaps with a water park or an interactive water feature of some kind. We think the history of the square indicates it has always functioned in this way, although perhaps it's never been entirely given over to large-scale events, given the existence of the fountain. However, the original idea behind the square was as an oasis in the busy life of the city. So the normal functioning of the square would provide a place for people to gather in small groups, sit down, enjoy the landscape, listen and watch the fountain, as one does in numerous fountains and squares around the world. And this design intent, would be seriously compromised if the new scheme, when it comes forward, eradicates the fountain and tries to bend it to a purpose of, say, larger scale, more intense gatherings, this kind of use.